So my name is William Grismore. I'm one of the co-founders here at 27 Virtual. We started doing this consulting work back in 2016 and been working on it ever since. We have a sister company, 27 Virtual. It's more of an education business doing VMware enablement and training for quite some time. My primary role at the company is I'm the co-founder, lead architect, help kind of determine policy and what we're doing within the business. And I'm going to introduce Jason first and foremost. Jason, you want to kick it off? Jason's been with us for quite a while, one of our first employees, and has been doing a lot of work around security. So Jason, you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, for sure. Like Bill said, I've been here for a little bit. I was also previously a customer for a long time. Then I joined on this side, so it's great to be here now. Yeah, so as Bill mentioned, I do a lot of work with our operations for logs and networks, primarily in the security space, right? So how do we secure your applications, your networks, etc., right? And that's my focus all day, every day. Thanks, Bill.
Great, and I'm going to turn over to Damien. Damien's awesome. He's one of the most amazing automation people I've ever met. He's really deep into the VMware stack for years, like 20 years probably. A lot of experience around automation and ops. Damien, you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Damien. As I said, yeah, around 20 years starting with VMware. And since then, a lot of work around automation, operation, everything that's needed right now for the VCF deployment.
Okay, great. So it's kind of an interesting combination. So one thing about 27 Virtual as companies, we have a very diverse skill set, and our teams work together to provide complete solutions for our customers around the VMware Cloud Foundation stack, and specifically the Aria Suite. And I like the title of this presentation. The goal here is to unlock that value. So we're going to figure out how we can get you to that by walking you through that. And first, we're going to do a little bit about 27 Virtual. Then we're going to get into unlocking the power of the Aria Suite with VCF, a little bit of a step back, if you will, just on what VCF is and the different models you can use, how to get the Aria Suite deployed. And then when we get to 3, we're going to talk to Jason about number 3, logs and networks. And then we'll talk to Damien about operations automation. And then we have some interesting success stories we're going to talk about that 27 Virtual's been involved in, and how we can bring value to get your time to value to be much faster and better in this world. So just the quick background on 27 Virtual. 27 Virtual Education, it's been around since 2006. We did the NSX Ninja starting in 2014. We've trained literally thousands of people, tens of thousands of people on core VMware NSX VCF. We developed the Ninja program, Security Ninja. VCF Ninja is about to be released to the strategic customers globally, and we're updating that, and that should be out very soon. I have May or June, but it's due out very soon as well. And then we have the consulting business starting in 2017. We built a team of VMware experts. We've done over 275. It keeps growing. It's a moving target, probably like 300 deployments to date. And when I say that, I'm talking, just our customers. Usually, most of the projects are very complex. Some projects run 2 or 3 months. Some can run up to a year, some 2 years. Typically, we see an average run of about 3 to 9 months on projects these days. But everything from NSX design and deploys, NSX V to T migrations, data center migrations like VCF design and deploys, and those usually include some type of a migration, like either from an old platform to the new, using that HCX tool. So that's 27 Virtual Education and 27 Virtual Consulting. And we're proud to announce that we received the Broadcom Application Network and Security Partner of the Year for North America in 2023. So that's pretty cool. We're really excited about that, and we really take a lot of pride in the fact that we have that. If you don't know what that means, it just basically means anything with like around NSX networking and security, primarily security, and then the AVI or the NSX Advanced Load Balancer. So that suite of products specifically. Now, we received that award. That doesn't mean that's all we do. We do the full stack. We do VCF, we do vSphere, we do vSAN, we do NSX and a lot of NSX, and then the full Aria Suite along with it. All right, so this is just a reset. So what we're going to do is find out about the Aria Suite and what's actually included. So I'm sure most of you have heard the news, the new bundling of the packages that VMware by Broadcom is producing. The number one we're focused on today, even though there's 4 different bundles, is VCF and then the VCF add-ons. So VCF is very important. It's going to be your pillar product. You can start out with everything in that VCF suite on a per core licensing basis based on your needs. And then you can have the VCF add-ons to that. What we're focused on in the Aria suite specifically is Aria automation, Aria operations, operations for logs, Aria operations for network. And then also as an add-on, if we're doing logs and network security around the firewall, which is an add-on feature to VCF. Now the NSX network is included, which can be used for automation, but we don't have the NSX security included by default. And then all of that is controlled by the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager on the top. So that's the last kind of piece. And everything gets deployed from there, gets updated from there, which is very important. And as a level set, these are your base VCF deployment options. Before you even get to the Aria Suite deployment, you can do VMware Cloud Foundation for a single site. So if your company that has a data center and you've got your 4 hosts for your management and at least 4 hosts for or 3 hosts for your workload, you can get that deployed. It should be noted there is a minimum requirement to have vSAN in the management cluster. You can also have a stretched cluster. There are some pretty tight requirements on latency between data centers to support the storage communication for vSAN, with that being stretched in the vSAN witness, but it is very possible. Check the documentation for latency. I think you're looking around 5 milliseconds to support the storage-based latency there. But it's a really great solution. We've done a bunch of these deployments for customers, by the way. Customers love this stretch solution if they support the latency for it. You can also do a single site and then have a remote site with just a workload domain, or you can actually have separate complete stacks in different regions and kind of tie them together if you deploy NSX Federation on top of it from a networking perspective, networking security perspective. And there are some changes and some improvements coming out with that in the pipeline from VMware by Broadcom as we move forward. So we're not here to talk about that too much. What we're really here to talk about is the Aria Suite and unlocking the value of the Aria Suite and how we get to that from the SCDC manager. So this is just a quick overview. Sorry. This is just a quick overview of the Aria Suite. So we're doing the deployment from the SCDC manager. So SCDC manager is deployed. We're deploying the Aria Suite. We get it out there. The Aria Suite Lifecycle Management is deployed from the SCDC manager. The Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager components, they're going to deploy the suite of products, the Workspace Access 1, VMware Workspace 1 Access, Aria Operations Manager, Aria Operations for Logs, and VMware Aria Automation. We can also deploy networks from here as well, or it can be done as a separate deployment depending on your use case. And then this can be deployed and then can point to the workload domains where the workloads sit and actually consume those appliances. It's like the concept of a management domain where the management components sit, and then the workload domain where the workloads sit, and then those workloads can leverage these management components. So that's just kind of an overview. So the thing that's important to understand is that there's automation, Aria Suite Automation, a tool that does automation, and there's vCenter orchestration and automation. But just the Aria Suite itself, the management of it, the deployment of it is also automated, which is an extra layer, which is important for building a private cloud. So VCF, the Aria Suite Lifecycle Management, all the components that make it up, and then the lifecycle management of those once it's deployed. That would include security patches or updates. And there's some interesting things we can do around keeping those different components deployed and updated as we go along. So with that groundwork, what we're going to do is we're going to focus now on Aria Operations for Networks first, and then logs. So Jason, we're going to talk about this. So we have customers that are deploying VCF, and they're also deploying the full Aria Suite, from the SCDC manager and the Lifecycle Manager, and have all these components deployed. The two main tools we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so are going to be the Aria Ops for networks and logs. And we also mentioned intelligence here. It's not really part of it. Can you explain to everybody like the difference between the main tools and where you would use them and why?
Yeah, sure. So Operations for Log is more analogous with a standard sys logging tool, right? It's obviously more than that. It's geared towards your VMware environment. It's designed to ingest logs and give us an easy way to get results there. operations for networks is really that visibility tool, right? Where you can see sort of how your applications are behaving, how VMs are interacting with each other, performance metrics on your network, like really that holistic knock of what your network and your applications and VMs are doing. And like you said, NSX intelligence is outside of the Aria suite, but it is baked into our NSX deployments, and it is squarely geared towards securing applications and giving you insight into that. There's some interactions between Aria operations for networks and intelligence, but intelligence is squarely focused on NSX security.
So NSX intelligence does not come with the Aria suite. Is that correct?
Correct. And it's not managed or deployed by lifecycle manager or any of that stuff. It's squarely within the NSX stack itself.
Okay, so it's an NSX feature, if you will, that we can deploy separately.
Correct.
All right, so operations for networks. So operations for networks, I'm using it to look at traffic flows. Is that the main idea?
Yeah, traffic flows, performance metrics on your network, any interactions between those two, and by that I mean, am I seeing sort of issues with my applications that might be related to networks, more than just how the applications are sort of communicating or interacting with each other, but like it says, here, it's more of like a holistic network knock from all the way down to your VNIC, all the way up to your edge routers, and in even many circumstances, physical assets on the network. It can ingest that information and give you insight as to what's happening within the network.
So it's well known. So the summary is it's well known as a tool to look at traffic flows to help you build firewall rules, but it's more than that. It's also a general overall network monitoring, you call it a network operations, like ops, like a tool for network ops, which is good. Thus the name Aria Operations for Networks. So it looks at performance, throughput, traffic flows. Exactly. And then logs is primarily for what again?
Logs is, as it says, right? So it's more of a traditional syslog tool, right? The more analogous to the Splunks of the world, but from VMware geared towards your private cloud, right? So that it has the smarts and the usability to make managing your private cloud that much easier, right? So think about if you had to troubleshoot a problem across your ESX host. Without a tool like this, you might be logging into each and every ESX host to look at logs there, while this can aggregate logs into a centralized location and give us that quick insight as to what's happening with our hosts in this specific example.
So let's focus on Aria Operations for Networks. So this is a slide I put up here. Mm-hmm. What are they trying to show me in this picture?
So really what we're seeing here is sort of the interactions of the different components within the networks, right? You can see sort of from an external point, there was some sort of traffic coming in and then making its way across, sort of going from right to left here, and some other interactions coming where the end user is on the left coming in, right? So really this is what Aria Operations for Networks can show us, right? What are our VMs and our applications actually doing, right? So there's often sort of a gap between what we assume or we typically understand that they're doing and the reality of what they're doing and how we actually need to position our security postures.
Okay, great. So basically we're looking at a picture of somebody's network. There's some north-south traffic going on. There's some east-west traffic on. And basically what they're showing you here is that there's a bunch of traffic going on east-west, and we can use this Aria Operations for Networks tool to get visibility into that traffic flow.
Correct, yes.
And then what are they showing us here?
So, sort of on your left, you have a graph of interactions, right? And then obviously we don't have it here, but if you were to click on sort of one of those components, you can deep dive and drill into sort of what's happening at that level. Over on the right-hand side, we see sort of a graph where it's saying, here are the different types of traffic patterns that we see within the network. 84%, I'll draw attention to 84% east-west traffic, so traffic within the data center, and then 16% north-south, in and out the data center, right, heading to the public internet. And even if you flip back to the previous slide, you'll see that's a perfect example of sort of that ratio, right, where there is only minimal coming into the network, but actually the majority of the traffic is actually within the internal network box that we have here, right? That's where, from a pure throughput and packet count perspective, that's where all the stuff's happening.
So you've worked on a lot of projects for us. So what do you normally see in real life on those percentages?
Yeah, in real life, it's more like, 98, 99% east-west, where, majority of the traffic is all within the data center, right? Application servers talking to database servers, all the backups, all the file transfers, all that stuff. And then really typically traffic heading out to the public internet is, 1 or 2% typically, unless were some sort of SaaS provider and your business was providing a service to the public internet, then that would probably align you more with like this sort of 84-16 that we see here.
Right. Yep. If I were to click on one of those flows on the graphic on the left, let's say that server on the backside, that 004 parentheses 2, whatever that server is, let's say it's my database server.
Yep.
I see who's connecting to my database server with this tool. Would it show that to me?
Correctly. When we say who, we would see what sort of endpoints are connecting to it, right? Is it another database server? Is it an end user PC? Is it that sort of component, right? Yeah, you'll be able to drill down and get further insights into not just the endpoints, but the TCP and UDP ports and traffic rates and summarizations of total traffic, right? Which, if you're thinking about it from a security posture, might influence your decision on whether something's legitimately application traffic or just some sort of extraneous, maybe Windows just being chattery type traffic.
So if we clicked on that flow to the database server and we saw it was connecting out to the internet, that probably would be a bad thing.
Yeah, that sounds like these days red flag, right?
That probably would be a bad thing.
Yes. Yeah.
What are they showing us here?
So these are recommended firewall rules. So there is a functionality within the application that says, hey, based on some entity, right? It could be virtual machine, it could be NSX security group, or even sort of like an NSX segment. Provide me a recommendation on what firewall rules would be required for me to secure this entity, right? And so that's sort of what we see here, where there's a source, a destination, or TCP and UDP ports. The action is allow. When you're starting out, everything's allow. And then the related flows is sort of a click here to get more information type thing, right? You would drill down to see why it recommended this firewall rule to you.
And just because they recommend it doesn't mean I should actually allow it, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's where sort of your sort of inner company knowledge, subject matter experts, vendor documentation, those types of things will give you insight as to whether or not this is legitimate traffic, right? Everybody who's been in IT for a while knows that, especially Windows servers, they turn legacy protocols on, the net BIOS is, that sort of thing. They're just, kind of screaming into the wind there.
Okay, great. And what is this showing us?
So this is back to our conversation where we were saying, hey, it's not just a security planning tool, but it's actually more of like a NOC, right? Like a more holistic point of view. And so this shows us the path of traffic from a specific point A to point B. In the image, we can see it starts out at the database server. I don't think we actually see where it ends up because the list sort of trails off. But you can follow the traffic as it jumped around the network to different endpoints. And along the way, as you can see, it's trying to draw your attention to some things that maybe need investigation, right? The little red dots, right? And then you would drill down and get supplemental information.
Yeah, I love these graphical tools where I can actually see visually what's going on and click in, and all these items are clickable.
Correct. Yep.
And then this is like a chart. What is this chart telling us here?
So this is our sort of hierarchical view of the way we position the NSX distributed firewall, where there are some built-in categories within the infrastructure that, within the NSX structure, I should say, that guide us into making policies of certain types within certain categories. And this all sort of leads us into having a firewall that's not only robust in functionality, but also easy to administer, right? So if we're thinking of, hey, 99% of my traffic's inside, then we need some structure and guidance in a way from VMware to say, hey, this is how we structure things so that it's not a hairball, essentially, right? That we have something that's clean, easily manageable, right? That's the method that we use to guide our customers through, securing their private cloud.
So we shouldn't just go start creating firewall rules to protect the database server and then decide to prevent RDP access and say, oh yeah, we forgot about DNS, and then
Exactly, right. We have a sort of a guided method to ensure that critical functionality within the network is present, is continuing to function, and we gain the security that we desire.
Let me ask you a question. So if you're doing a project for a customer and you start going through this, assuming the customer gives you the time you need to work with them, how long does it take for an average medium-sized customer to get infrastructure rules in place and some applications protected? Let's say they want to protect, I don't know, 15 VMs, 5 VMs, perhaps something simple. Like, what's an average timeline does it take to do something like that?
Yeah, we can get something done like that in 90 days, no problem, right? And that is not just the rule building is sort of like the easy bit, right? In a sense, right? It's all the work that gets us to the point that we can create rules, right? Our design, our desired outcomes, any regulations that we have to take into consideration, the things like the HIPAA, the PCI stuff, all that sort of stuff that we need to make sure that we're in alignment there so that when we get to the rule building phase, the rule building sort of just flows. It comes naturally, right? We have our tool that'll give us insight. Our ARIA operations for networks will say, hey, like these are the rules that you should be putting in. And
it looks something like this, right?
Exactly, right? So we'll get to a point where we can turn that reject on or drop, get the enforcement that we want.
So we've done the ARIA operations for networks to look at the flows. We're building the firewall rules based on the information. There's some recommended stuff. We're following some procedures and practices to build the rules. We decide to put a drop rule at the bottom to make sure things are actually enforced. There's a magic day where you turn on that reject at the bottom to make sure things are working. But just before we get to that, we have to do some logging. We're going to get that in a minute, but our goal is to get customers to something like this. Just real quick on this one.
Yeah, correct, right? So we can see here that instead of sort of that, as I said earlier to you in that conversation, where that wild east-west, that we have now clearly defined security boundaries between either between apps or even down to between components of applications, right? So we can see sort of the diagram here where we have different applications that are now secured, represented by that firewall symbol, where the threat actor coming in can get to that one VM, but now that he's in, there's no lateral movement that's capable because we've had the ability to enforce security there at the VNIC.
Okay, great. So we do a lot of work. I'm going to back up just for a minute. So we do a lot of work. So we started out here. We installed some tooling with the VCF Aria Suite.
Mm-hmm.
We got some rule recommendations. We looked at the traffic flows. We followed procedures. We built some rules, and we're trying to get to the zero trust. So that's a pretty good story about unlocking the power of the Aria Suite for customers that have VCF deployed. We have about 5 minutes to spend on this one. So when we get to this step here where we're actually building the rules, now we want to talk about kind of like logs holistically, but then specifically about how it helps with security. So let's talk about ARIA operations for logs. And can you tell me just at a high level what it is and how we use it generally, and then specifically about for helping us with our firewall rule building?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're to classify ARIA for networks, then that's our visibility tool, right? We're gaining insight into what's happening within our network. And then so we classify this tool as our validation tool, right? We now have a rule set that we need to validate that is going to do primarily two things. One, it's not going to break our app, right? Because if we secure our app and nobody can use it, there's no point in that. And then two, it'll give us the security that we set out to gain, right? So that's really, from a security perspective, that's what we use this tool for, to ensure that our rule set is going to provide the security and behave in a manner that we can predict. And from a more holistic standpoint, I've mentioned a bit of it before, it's a centralized place for troubleshooting, alerting, getting insight with the dashboards as to different sort of events within your private cloud.
And then these content packs you can add, and this is showing an NSX content pack, which is important for security projects, but it's more than that, right?
Yeah, right. So content packs really maybe analogous to sort of like an extension, right? It gives operations for logs some smarts that it doesn't necessarily have out the box. This one's showing a VMware provided one, but there's others depending on what you're looking for. You can have like your ILO, your DRAC, that sort of stuff, where it'll give you some smarts, and by that I mean built-in queries, built-in alerts, and some quick searches for drilling down into information quickly, right? So yeah, it's very useful. That's one of the first things we do.
And these are our dashboards. We use these quite a bit as well, right?
Correct. Yep. So if we're working with customers, we step them through creating custom dashboards that represent the security for the applications, right? So at a glance, they can have some insight as to, are things behaving normally, or is there something that needs my attention that I need to dive into?
And speaking of diving into it, I know you look at these quite a bit. So can you talk about how we leverage, or what do we look for when we're helping customers with analyzing their logs?
Yeah. So primarily, what we're trying to do is use this tool to make sure that our rule set is behaving the way it should, right? And secondarily, that it's sort of crossing the T's and dotting the I's of our rule set, right? Making sure that we didn't miss anything throughout our process, right? Things can happen, right? Sort of the infrequent jobs, month-end close. This gives us the opportunity to really put the icing on the cake before we attempt to enable any sort of security.
Right, we don't want to accidentally, if we go back to that one slide, right, we don't want to, if we go all the way back, we don't want to put that reject in there.
Correct.
Something blocked. It's as bad as like an outage or taking something down, right? So it's important to make sure that we understand what it is. So we're using one tool to understand the flows, to build the firewall rules, get the rules built. And then just before we implement that drop, we're using logs to verify that for certain that we know what's going on. Is that a fair summary?
Exactly, right? It gives us that confidence. I like that word, right? Confidence that when we put in our change request, and that moment that we say, hey, we're going to change this action from allow to drop, and our app owners test that with high degree of certainty, they're just going to say, hey, things work, right?
Okay, great. So, and one last thing before we move on to the next topic. So just to make sure everybody understands is that you can use both the ARIA operations for networks and logs without NSX, correct?
Correct. Yes, they're independent of that. I would say most often used with NSX, but there's not a mandatory integration there at all.
Right. It does showcase the features and how a lot of our customers are using it, though.
Correct.
Right. And one of the reasons I have Jason and Damien together, they worked on an interesting project together. We're going to talk about that at the end, but then we're going to shift over. Jason, thanks for all that. We're going to shift over now to Damien, and we're going to talk about ARIA operations. So there's really 4 components to this suite. There's the network, the logs, the operations, and then there's the automation. And of course, with automation, there's some orchestration as well. But Damien is going to explain to us at a high level first, Damien, can you just tell us, the high level, or what are the top 3 things I need to know about operations?
Well, I would say Aria Operation is your single pane of glass for your VCF. So it's going to help you looking at things like creating dashboards, looking at object metrics, object properties, anything about alerts as well can be used. And there's a lot of management packs in the product that you can use even outside of VCF, like physical hardware, and you have specific metrics you want to collect. That's going to be the single pane of glass that you can use for your VCF. And that includes also what we said before, the logs. There's an integration with logs as well. That way, when you troubleshoot something or if you click on an object, you will see the log showing up right away. It's very useful for the administrator team. And there's some benefit to using Operation Manager as well, such as the reclaim that you can see right here. So since it's as we say, it's a private cloud, so one of the goals is to also put some cost in there, and it's going to show you the cost of a clusters, cost of a host, cost of a VM, cost of a group of VMs. And based on that, then you can see the reclaim up here. You may see some costings as well. So the costing metrics is a good value and something that you can leverage as well with the Aria automation. When you deploy VM, it's going to use that operation manager to retrieve the cost and show it to the end user. So yeah, things like everything that you see up here can be automated as well. So if you see one VM that's idle or something that needs to change, like orphan disks, there's some automation workflow that we could provide.
So basically, so to summarize it, Aria Operations is like one of your main tools to make sure your vSphere or your VCF environment, in this case, is optimized and that you're not wasting resources, so you can assign a cost. So if we go back to this conversation about the Aria Suite being a tool that we're deploying to unlock the value of the private cloud, we want to make sure if we are running it as a true private cloud, based on the number of servers we have, based on the number of cores we have, based on our license count, that we're getting the most out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's fair to say, just looking at this at a high level, looking at the CPU, the memory, the costing, if I got orphan disks I can get rid of that are using up space, or idle VMs I can get rid of, VMs that are powered off maybe that I'm not using. So isn't that really the main idea is I have this investment in this stack, I have all this stuff running, and I'm using Aria Operations as kind of like a overseer of my day-to-day operations to make sure everything is optimized. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's correct. And also what I like about the tools, and I mean, it's not new, right? It was VCAC pretty much 15 years ago. So it's just a software that improved year by year. And now I see that what I like about it is you can provide that access to C-level just to create dashboard and reports, but also to help the team to troubleshoot the VCF stack. So yeah, that's definitely a tool you want to use for
before they're coming, basically, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
You can kind of see things before the bad thing happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and especially capacity planning as well. Very good to have if you want to scale, because that's the goal. It's a private cloud. You're talking about scaling out, scaling up. You really want a tool that helps you identify not just about the cost as well, but it could be what you have already deployed, what's the demand, and go with it.
And if I get used to using it and I check it on a daily basis and I know what to look for, it becomes even more and more valuable. So the more we use it, the more we look at it, the more we understand it, we know what our environment is, I can do more and more with it. There's other add-ons, and I can get a really good value out of it. And just to remember, everybody, if you're joining the session, you can put questions in the chat. We can see any questions you may have. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in there. I know we can't type back, but we can respond verbally. So yeah, so this is a great tool. I'm going to go on here to the next slide here. So right sizing. So what's this all about?
Yeah, so what right sizing is gonna. So first off, it's an intelligent tool, so it's gonna take about a week or two to understand your environment, and based on that, it will show you some recommendation, which is, for example, that one is just a right sizing. Could be right sizing of Usually it's been used for VMs, as you have on the screen up here. So it's going to show you what VMs are oversized, undersized, and you can create some actions and automation behind that will resize the VM automatically, or send some approval before it's been resized, things like that. So that could be very, very useful. Yeah, especially on a private cloud based. So and then you can create some, again, capacity planning and well, I think you have some what if scenarios as well that we can discuss. That's kind of based with that. But first off, when you deploy the tool, you want to make sure you're going to collect the right data. So it's going to take, again, about a week or two to understand the environment, and also based on the different policies that you create. You can have different policies for a different group of users. Like database probably have a specific policy with different metrics that's going to collect. So the right sizing is not going to be exactly the same number as another team. So it's really customizable.
Right. And there's that classic story that we've heard a million times, right? The one about the vendor said the VM should have 24 gig of RAM, right? And then you look at it, is that something you see like, oh, this vendor said, yeah, for this application, it needs 24 gig of RAM and it needs 4 CPUs. And then you deploy like 4 of them. Is this tool going to help us figure out whether the vendor's telling us the truth or not?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, especially because it's going to learn. It's going to look at the peak as well. So it's not just the average consumption of vCPU and memory and disk, but also it's going to be aware of the behavior of the VM. So it's and you don't want to oversize the VM, because at the end of the day you may have to create some CPU radius or latency behind. So it's really important to have the right size of CPU. Memory as well, but the vCPU is a big deal, especially if you have some VDI running in it. That's going to give you some real insight of what's going on.
Right. So if I have in a VCF environment, I have 8 servers in my workload domain, and I've got 2 sockets, and I got 24 core each, and I just deploy whatever the software vendor tells me to deploy. I could run out of space pretty quickly, right?
Right.
And this is going to help me understand what that is better.
Yeah, and you can create some policies that says, I don't want to allocate more than 5 vCPU per core or something like that. And it's going to show you right away how many VMs left you can deploy on that cluster. It could be very useful, especially if you plug that with Aria automation. That way, it's going to learn from Aria operations as well. When you deploy VM, it's going to tell you right away which cluster is going to fit better.
Yeah, it's like I'm always running out of space on my DVR in the cloud, right? And then I got to call up Comcast to add another 10 gig. I don't want to be doing that on my private cloud. Those servers, I heard, can be pretty expensive. So
and especially, well, I'm going to cover that with the what if, but just so everybody's aware of, but it will be used for VCF, but there's some management pack for Azure. There's some management pack for any public cloud, as it says right here on the screen. And with the what if scenario, you can compare costs, but you also can compare forecasts and see, for example, I want to deploy 50 VMs for a specific use case. Is that going to fit? And if not, how many hosts do I need to add to my workload domain? And then you can combine those what if scenarios together. It's really useful. We've been using that a lot, especially for capacity planning.
It sounds like if people don't have operations deployed, they're missing the boat. I mean, it sounds like a pretty useful tool. I know back in the days there was what was that vendor, Turbonomics? Remember that one?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That kind of stuff, right? So this is like the tool. It just comes with it. It comes with it. You got the full stack. Leverage it. So what if is very useful. And let's spin over to Aria automation. So we have these main components. So we have, in summary so far, we have networks, we have logs, we have ops. Looks super valuable from a cost saving and planning, what if standpoint, and right sizing and all that good stuff. And then we have Aria automation, and of course there's some orchestration that's included with vCenter. What is VMware's vision behind this? Is it just, I guess the thing that I hear you say a lot when we're on calls together and with customers is that Aria automation is more than just deploying workloads on VMware. Can you talk about that and high level? What is it? What's this target for? How should customers think about using it?
Yeah, right. And again, it's not a tool that just came out. I mean, it's been there for the last 15 years with VCAC. So we've been using it for the last 10, 15 years now. And we have a lot of feedbacks from customers. I think it's a great tool, though. It's not just for on-prem. It's not just for deploying a VM. In my opinion, it's to deploy a VM and its lifecycle. It's not just a VM. It could be a multi-VM. It could be, CI/CD kind of deployment that you're trying to achieve. But what I'm thinking is usually the life cycle of what you're trying to deploy. You want to automate that. You want to make sure, when it's deployed, it's just not just deploy. It's going to be, you can provide some day two actions. You can make sure, when it's going to be decommissioned, it's going to be decommissioned as it should. And when you deploy the machine, it's not just the machine. It's going to be maybe integrating the machine with IPAM, with CMDB, with the backup solution, with the firewall, as we said before. Could be DNS, load balancer, anything in it could be valuable. And as long as we have an API, we could play with it. So it's great. I mean, the sky is a limit. Basically, if you have API, you could do whatever you want. And again, it's integrated with Aria Ops, meaning that when you deploy a VM, what I like is it's going to show you the cost. And based on that, you can create some workflows and approvals. So you could say, if my VM is more expensive than $10 a day, I want a specific approval that goes to another team, that kind of thing. So
it integrates with Ops and it integrates with NSX, and we can also bring in the firewall rules, and we can also make sure it's got, the virtual machine is added to the right OU and Active Directory, and we can also do IPAM integration to get an IP address and all that stuff. And I can also deploy these workloads in the cloud too, if I want, right? There's an option for that as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you can deploy on Azure, on VMC, on AWS. Yeah, it's a CM, it's a cloud management portal. So that's something you're going to give to the end user to deploy an instance or a multiple instance.
So the thing I want to just make sure we point out to everybody watching is that if you have VCF and you have the Aria Suite, you have the full product, this is kind of the last piece. Wouldn't you agree, Damien? This is like the last piece that really takes and flips the switch and turns your stack into a true private cloud. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Yeah, there's a great return on investment for sure with that one. And as Jason said before, I think the keyword is confidence. You want to deploy machines, you're going to deploy multiple machines and make sure it's going to land in the right space, including a firewall. You want to make sure, you don't deploy a machine that's not secured. So that's all stack should be connected together, right? When you deploy VCF.
And just for fun, I know you probably don't know this off the top of your head, just so people watching this know from a 27 virtual perspective, like how many of these deployments have you done? How much code have you written? I mean, what is your experience with this? And you said 15 years. How long have you been working with it? And like, what kind of deployments have you done and how many times have you seen it?
Oh my, I don't know. I've been deploying that in Europe a lot, in here for many banks, many healthcare. I mean, yeah, it pretty much, as soon as you want to deploy a VM, you might want to look at what can be automated on top of it, right?
I met one guy one time, he said, if I can't automate it, we don't do it, right? And I thought that's kind of an interesting stance. And I think that it's really hard to do that sometimes, but if you have VCF and you have the Aria Suite, you have the whole stack, I think that, and you can use different automation tools. We all know there's all sorts of different automation tools out there, right? If you have this full stack, it's a shame to miss this and not take advantage of what's out there. So it fits within the VMware Cloud Foundation stack. It's going to allow you to provide a front end to the consumer, and it's going to allow you to allow the consumer to make requests of workloads. So if I have it set up correctly, is it fair to say, Damien, that now my environment can be built in such a way that it's a true private cloud? In other words, if somebody goes to AWS to spin up a native instance in AWS or in Azure, if this is built correctly, with confidence, we're going to stick with that theme, with confidence, can I build a platform that users can go to, and it has the same look and feel on-prem as a private cloud as it does going to a public cloud. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you have, the same day two actions. You have the same lifecycle. So yeah. Yeah, and especially, I mean, you're talking about private cloud and make sure, it's going to be the same. You're also talking about scaling, right? So let's say you have multiple VCF stack, multiple data center. You also want to make sure everything's going to be automated, not just for the VM itself, but making sure, the VM is going to be, available in DR cases. That VM is going to be backed up, everything like that. And we talked about DFW rules.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure those tags, if you plan with tags, those tags going to be replicated between all the sites, right? Because if the VM is recovered somewhere else, you want to make sure it's going to land on the same security rules.
Yeah, so this entire process, and then, like you said, end-to-end management, from deployment to lifecycle to backup to recovery to eventually, at some point, destroying the machine where you don't need it anymore. All those kind of things throughout the entire lifecycle of the workload.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a company and I have VCF and I have the Aria Suite deployed, these things are what we talk about a lot, is faster time to market, ease of use, accelerated innovation. And these things are thrown around a lot, I think, but until customers actually get it deployed, get all the things in place they need to turn all these things on, they don't see the value. So I think that it's really important that customers understand that 27Virtual as a partner can help customers get to these states much quicker and actually start realizing, the benefits here.
Yeah, and maybe not just that, but the migration as well, right? Because you want to make sure, I mean, if you have 10,000 VMs already deployed in another cloud and you want to migrate those to VCF, we have HCX, and HCX has some API, and we've done that with other customer. We need to automate that. You won't be able to migrate one by one. And you want to make sure when you migrate, maybe DNS might be changed. CMDB is not going to be the same. So it's not just the migration, it's the whole flow that needs to be automated, right?
Right. It could be flows for day-to-day management or flows for migrations of workloads. It could be all of that, right? And just to kind of promote Damien's skills, there's amazing stuff he's done with some customers with automation from, like he said, automating the migration process with HCX, because HCX is a great tool, and you can definitely do these RAP migrations, some cool things. We've also built tools to allow installation of the OSAM agents on those non-VMware workloads, all those kind of things that we've done across different projects. Also, Damien's done a lot of work on automation for migrating workloads from old versions of NSX to new versions of NSX, if that's still a thing. There's some of that. There's a lot of different use cases other than just the day-to-day management of the workloads themselves, but there's a lot of good stuff there. So the big summary is, VCF and the Aria Suite unlocks all these capabilities from networks to logs to day-to-day operations to automation, and it comes in a complete package that it gives you a true private cloud. And then, we don't talk about it here, but yes, you can install HCX, which allows you to migrate workloads into the new platform or to migrate workloads to a VMware Cloud solution if you have that. It's good for the DevOps infrastructure, and there's also automation around Kubernetes. And there's a Tanzu capability that's built into vSphere as well. It's beyond the scope of our conversation here, but there's a lot of things there that we can take advantage of. So this is kind of a busy slide, but on the top left, you got the cloud consumers, you got the infrastructure, the abstraction layer, and then there's backend support. And I guess the point is that VMware has solutions for on-prem. If you look at the bottom of the slide, you got the VMware Cloud on-prem with all the components, and then you have the VMware Cloud solutions and the hyperscalers, and the ability to build a standardized platform across these clouds. And you can build workloads, and you can also migrate workloads to the VMware Cloud and out to cloud native and automate many of these components to allow the consumers on the top to not really see what's going on underneath, where the underneath infrastructure as service or cloud as a service, whatever it may be, is abstracted as much as possible to make their day-to-day actions as simplified as it can be. And then we're going to wrap it up here in a minute. So the last thing here we're going to get into is the Aria Suite and the vRealize Lifecycle Management. So one thing that's important is that these main four components that we're talking about, the networks, the logs, the automation, operations, all these things here we're talking about are also managed by the lifecycle management. So the lifecycle management that comes with the SCDC Manager and the VCLM allows us to download the bundles and the updates and make sure that we do the proper reviews and the pre-checks, schedule the updates, and get those bundles released and get them out into the SCDC Manager and eventually to the vRealize Lifecycle Manager for the components that we have specifically around the Aria Suite. So there's just general SCDC Manager updates, and then there's the Aria Lifecycle Management updates. So not only are we automating the environment once it's all in place, but we're also automating the platform itself from installation, day two operations management and updates, security updates and patches, all the way through the beginning to end. So there's kind of like the whole story, the beginning, getting it deployed, the middle, what we just talked about, the main four components. And then the end of the story is the day-to-day management of the platform through the VCF suite of tools and products that make it easy to manage. So all that together is the complete solution that provides you with a private cloud to give everybody the ability to make their data center act like a true private cloud and take advantage of all those capabilities that are included in the suite. You know, what we find as a partner is a lot of customers have some of these tools, but they don't leverage them. 27 Virtual is a trusted VMware partner that you can rely on to help you get all these components properly designed, deployed, validated. We actually have a very detailed design validation process, deployment validation. Then we get into the lifecycle management of the suite, the tools, the security, all those things through an entire 27 Virtual-based management process. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Jason in the last few minutes here, some success stories. And there's one in particular. Of course, we can't talk about customers, but we can talk in generalities, right? Can you guys talk about this project that you worked on that took advantage of everything and how your two skill sets work together?
Yeah, sure. Damien, I'll start off. So, you know, primarily it was a security-focused project, right? So, large healthcare provider, you know, a lot of valuable data there for nefarious actors. And so together, Damien and I developed like a holistic standpoint, right? So from my perspective, coming in to assist the customer with designing their security posture, you know, getting the requirements that they have, and bringing everything in that we just talked about from our operations for networks and logs and all those components. And then from the automation standpoint, Damien, I'll let you go into what you did, but the key thing that I want folks to understand is, especially from like a day two perspective, when things like getting a VM, new VM, right? You're moving from like 2016 to 2022. And once you have automation and tagging in place, then as Damien said before, you're able to get seamless deployment of VMs that land with security, right? And that's the biggest thing for the customer, right? They didn't have a gap in security in that respect. And then Damien, I'll pass it over to you for your few bits there.
Yeah, for sure. And just in a nutshell, it's not very complicated. It's just integrating Aria automation with NSX, with API. And basically what we did is just to make sure when you deploy VM, it's going to land in the right security group that's based on tag, and the tag is assigned to the VM. And making sure also we have the workflows to tag and secure the existing VM, because it's not just what we deploy, but I was, you know, the thousands of VMs already deployed in the past, and make sure they're going to land in the right place in NSX. So
Yeah, and then just to key in on what you said again, that we keep saying tags, but it's very much a hierarchical approach, right? So the VM gets the right tagging, it lands in the right security group, and then it lands in the right policy based on security group membership, right? It's all very dynamic, and once it's in place, it's a pretty sweet deal to watch happen.
Yeah, and those tags can be based on CMDB. So that way, because the CMDB is the real, key components here. So it's the So you want to make sure those tags going to be aligned with what you have in the CMDB.
Versus doing it all manually, right?
For sure.
Building VMs manually, making sure the VM's tagged, double checking to make sure it's the right group. So building an infrastructure with VCF in the private cloud where we have all the tools, all the components, and the security, which is kind of out of the scope of this discussion, but I think it's really good to tie it all in. With NSX in place, if you have the NSX add-on for security for the DFW, being able to leverage all those things together so that not only is the workload in the process automated, but when it lands, it's tagged and it's in the right security group and it's secured. Like, correct. How awesome is that, right?
Yeah. One thing that I don't think people talk enough about too is sort of drift and sort of in terms of like configuration, right? As anybody who's been in IT long enough knows that today I come in, I think my naming convention is the best thing since sliced bread. And then, Damien will come in and be like, no, we should do another one. What the automation forces everybody's hand into having consistent naming structures and all those types of things across the board over time, right? And that's a very important thing. So to keep with sort of what I said before, we're having a complicated firewall that manages 99% of your traffic to be easily legible and manageable is the most important thing, I think, long term.
100%. And if you need to reach out to us, here's our sales team. So you got Brett Welch in the Northeast, Upper Midwest. You got Taylor in the Southeast. You got Spencer out in the Rockies, and Bryce out west for California. So everybody, great job, Jason. Thank you very much, Damien. Awesome job. If you want more or you want additional information, 27 Virtuals available for workshops. If you want more information, you want to meet with Jason individually, you want to get a one-on-one meeting with Damien, the expert. Just reach out to your sales team. We'd be happy to team up with you. If you're a VMware person or a salesperson, we can also help you as well. And we're happy to work with you to talk about these capabilities and how you can make VCF your private cloud with the Aria Suite and unlock the value of the Aria Suite. So thanks, guys. Great job. Great having you guys today. And thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in the next LinkedIn Live. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.